I agreed to my brother's child-free wedding thinking it applied to all children equally, until I overheard him telling our cousin we can't have his autistic daughter there because she freaks out the other kids and ruins the atmosphere, so I called him immediately and said if my daughter isn't welcome then neither am I, and sent a group text to the family explaining exactly why we wouldn't be attending his wedding. I'm still shaking as I write this, and I honestly don't know if I'm overreacting or if my anger is completely justified. What happened yesterday has me questioning everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my brother and whether I can ever forgive what he said about my daughter. For context, I'm 35 and have a 12-year-old daughter named Lily with autism spectrum disorder. Lily is high-functioning and incredibly intelligent, but she does have some social challenges and can sometimes have difficulty in crowded, overstimulating environments. She's made tremendous progress over the years with therapy and support, and she's generally able to participate in family gatherings and social events with some accommodations. My brother Mark is 32 and getting married to his fiancée Jessica next month. They announced 6 months ago that they were having a child-free wedding, which I completely understood and respected. Weddings are expensive, venues have space limitations, and some couples prefer an adults-only celebration. I was disappointed that Lily wouldn't be able to attend, but I accepted their decision and started making arrangements for childcare. What made their policy easier to accept was that Mark and Jessica presented it as applying to all children equally. They explained that they wanted an elegant, formal event and felt that having children present would change the atmosphere they were trying to create. They said it was nothing personal against any specific children, just a general preference for an adult celebration. I arranged for Lily to stay with my parents during the wedding weekend, and I spent money on a new dress and shoes for the occasion. Lily was a bit disappointed about missing the wedding, but I explained that sometimes events are planned specifically for adults, and she seemed to understand. Yesterday, I went to Mark's house to help with some wedding preparations. He was hosting a small gathering for some of our male cousins to address invitations and organize seating charts. I arrived early and was in the kitchen getting drinks when I heard Mark talking to our cousin Dave in the living room. Their conversation made my blood run cold. I'm actually relieved we decided on the child-free policy, Mark was saying. I mean, can you imagine having Op's autistic daughter there? She'd probably have one of her episodes and freak out all the other kids. The last thing we need is Lily having a meltdown and ruining the ceremony or reception. Yeah, that could get pretty awkward, Dave replied. Kids with disabilities can be unpredictable at events like this. Exactly, Mark continued. I love my niece, but let's be honest, she doesn't handle social situations well, and weddings are already stressful enough without worrying about her having a breakdown and making everyone uncomfortable. The child-free policy was perfect because it gave us a way to exclude her without having to say it directly. I stood frozen in the kitchen, unable to believe what I was hearing. My brother wasn't implementing a fair, across-the-board policy, he was specifically targeting my daughter while using the general child-free rule as cover. But it got worse. Jessica was worried about how to handle the situation, Mark went on. She didn't want to hurt Op's feelings by saying Lily specifically couldn't come, so the blanket no kids policy solved that problem. Now we can have the wedding we want without having to deal with any awkward disability situations. Smart thinking, Dave said. Some kids just aren't suitable for formal events. I couldn't listen to another word. I quietly left through the back door and sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what I just heard. My brother hadn't just excluded Lily from his wedding, he'd planned an elaborate deception to avoid telling me the real reason why. The child-free policy was a lie designed specifically to exclude my daughter while making it seem like a general rule that applied to everyone equally. He'd let me believe that Lily's exclusion was nothing personal when in reality, it was entirely personal. I called Mark immediately from my car. Hey, I had to leave early, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I wanted to ask you something about the wedding. Is the child-free policy really about all children, or is it specifically about Lily? There was a pause before he answered. What do you mean? I told you, we just want an adults-only event. Mark, I heard you talking to Dave. I heard you say that you didn't want Lily there because she might have an episode and freak out the other kids. Another pause, longer this time. Up, you're taking that conversation out of context. What context makes it okay to call my daughter's autism episodes and say she would ruin your wedding atmosphere? Look, I didn't mean it like that. We were just talking about logistics and crowd management. You know how overwhelming big events can be for Lily. So you admit that this policy is specifically about excluding my daughter? It's not that simple. We genuinely want a child-free wedding, but yes, part of our concern was making sure the event goes smoothly for everyone. Including making sure you don't have to deal with any awkward disability situations? Because that's what you told Dave. Mark's voice got defensive. I never said that. I heard you, Mark. Word for word. You said the child-free policy was perfect because it gave you a way to exclude Lily without having to say it directly. You're blowing this out of proportion. I love Lily, but you have to admit that she can be challenging in social situations. I was just being practical about planning my wedding. Being practical? You mean being discriminatory against your own niece and lying to me about your reasons? I'm not discriminating against anyone. I'm trying to plan a wedding that will be enjoyable for all the guests. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions. If you had concerns about Lily attending, you should have talked to me directly instead of creating an elaborate lie to exclude her. What was I supposed to say? Your daughter can't come because she's autistic? That would have been much worse. You were supposed to trust me enough to have an honest conversation about accommodations and solutions, not lie to my face for 6 months while talking behind my back about how my daughter would ruin your wedding. I wasn't talking behind your back, I was discussing logistics with family members. You were talking about my daughter like she's a problem to be managed rather than a person you claim to love. The conversation went downhill from there, with Mark becoming increasingly defensive and trying to justify his deception as protecting my feelings. He insisted that he did love Lily but that his wedding day was too important to risk any complications. You're being overdramatic about this, he said finally. I'm getting married in 3 weeks, and I don't need this kind of drama right now. Can't we just move past this and focus on celebrating my wedding? If my daughter isn't welcome at your wedding, then neither am I told him, and hung up. I immediately sent a group text to our extended family explaining exactly why Lily and I wouldn't be attending Mark's wedding. I included the quotes I'd overheard and explained that the child-free policy was actually a targeted exclusion designed specifically to keep my daughter away from the celebration. My phone started ringing within minutes. Update 1. The response from my family has been swift and intense. Thank you to everyone who commented with support. Reading your messages has helped me feel less alone in this situation. My parents called me within an hour of receiving my group text. They were horrified by what Mark had said and immediately told me they supported my decision not to attend the wedding. My mother was particularly upset. I can't believe he would say those things about Lily, she said through tears. That's his niece. We've all seen how well she does at family gatherings when people are patient and understanding with her. My father was angrier than I've ever heard him. What Mark said was cruel and discriminatory. If he had concerns, he should have talked to you like an adult instead of creating this elaborate deception. But the most significant response came from my Aunt Sarah, who has a teenage son with Down syndrome. She called me directly after receiving my text. I need you to know that Jessica's family has been asking specifically about accommodations for children with disabilities, she told me. Jessica's brother has a daughter with cerebral palsy, and they've been planning ways to make sure she can participate fully in the wedding. This revelation was devastating. Mark and Jessica weren't implementing a true child-free policy at all. They were allowing Jessica's niece with disabilities to attend while specifically excluding Lily, and they'd been planning accommodations for one child while using Lily's autism as justification for the supposed blanket ban. My aunt continued, Jessica's family has been talking about how important it is to include all family members regardless of their abilities. I think Jessica might not know what Mark really thinks about disabilities, or about Lily specifically. I asked my aunt if she was sure about this information, and she confirmed that Jessica's family had been openly discussing their plans to accommodate Jessica's niece throughout the wedding weekend. This meant that Mark's child-free policy was actually a Lily-free policy disguised as something more general and acceptable. Armed with this information, I called Jessica directly. We'd always had a good relationship, and I wanted to give her the opportunity to explain her side of the situation. Jessica, I need to ask you something directly. Is your niece with cerebral palsy invited to your wedding? There was a long pause. Yes, she is. We made an exception for her because she's family and because her parents felt it was important for her to be included. But you couldn't make an exception for Lily? What do you mean? Lily can't come because of our child-free policy. Jessica, your fiancé told our cousin Dave yesterday that the child-free policy was specifically designed to exclude Lily because her autism would ruin your wedding atmosphere. Another pause, much longer this time. He said what? I repeated exactly what I'd heard Mark say, including his comments about Lily having episodes and freaking out the other kids. I had no idea he felt that way, Jessica said, and she sounded genuinely shocked. When we discussed the child-free policy, he said it was about keeping the guest count manageable and creating an elegant atmosphere. He never mentioned Lily specifically. So you weren't part of planning this deception? Absolutely not. I've always liked Lily, and I would never exclude her because of her autism. I thought we were implementing a fair policy that applied to all children equally. Jessica told me she needed to have a serious conversation with Mark about what I told her. She also said she wanted to understand why Mark felt comfortable lying to both of us about his real motivations. 2 hours later, Mark called me back. He was furious. You had no right to involve Jessica in this, he said. You're trying to sabotage my wedding because you're upset about a private conversation that you weren't supposed to hear. A private conversation where you called my daughter's disability episodes and said she would ruin your wedding? I was venting to family members about wedding stress. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're under pressure. So you didn't mean it when you said the child-free policy was perfect for excluding Lily without having to say it directly? That's not. You're twisting my words. Mark, Jessica told me that her niece with cerebral palsy is invited to your wedding. So this was never actually a child-free policy, it was a policy specifically designed to exclude Lily while allowing other children to attend. Mark's anger escalated. Jessica's niece is different. She's older and more mature, and her disability doesn't affect her behavior the way Lily's does. Jessica's niece is 10 years old, 2 years younger than Lily. And you just admitted that this is about their disabilities, not their ages. Fine. Yes, it's about their disabilities. Jessica's niece won't disrupt the ceremony or make other guests uncomfortable. Lily might. I'm trying to protect everyone, including Lily. Protect Lily from what? From being part of her uncle's wedding? From being included in family celebrations? Protect her from being in a situation where she might struggle and embarrass herself. Protect our other guests from having to deal with a situation they're not comfortable with. The mask was completely off now. Mark was openly admitting that he saw Lily's autism as an embarrassment and a burden, and that his concern for her was actually concern about how her presence might affect his perfect wedding day. Mark, I've been to dozens of events with Lily over the years. She's never had a meltdown at a family gathering, she's never disrupted anything, and she's never made anyone uncomfortable except apparently you. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. Weddings are more stressful and formal than family dinners. So you decided to exclude her entirely instead of talking to me about accommodations or strategies to help her succeed? I decided to plan my wedding in a way that would be comfortable for everyone involved. Everyone except your niece. Mark hung up on me. Update 2. It's been a week since my confrontation with Mark, and the situation has escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. The family is essentially split down the middle, with some people supporting Mark's right to plan his wedding as he sees fit, and others horrified by his deception and discrimination against Lily. Jessica called me 3 days ago to tell me that she had ended her engagement to Mark. I was shocked. I hadn't intended for my revelation to destroy their relationship, just to expose the truth about what had been happening. I can't marry someone who would lie to me about something this important, Jessica told me. But more than that, I can't marry someone who thinks it's acceptable to discriminate against children with disabilities and then create elaborate deceptions to hide their prejudice. According to Jessica, her confrontation with Mark had revealed much more than just his feelings about Lily. When she pressed him about his attitudes toward people with disabilities, he'd made several other disturbing comments. He told me that he's always been uncomfortable around people with disabilities but that he's good at hiding it, Jessica said. He said he doesn't understand why people insist on including disabled family members in events where they might make others uncomfortable. Jessica also discovered that Mark had been lying to her about other aspects of their wedding planning. He told her that several family members had specifically requested a child-free wedding, when in reality he'd never consulted anyone about their preferences. I realized that if he could lie this easily about something involving your daughter, what else would he lie about in our marriage? Jessica said. I can't build a life with someone whose values are so different from mine and who's comfortable deceiving people to get what he wants. The cancelled wedding has created chaos in both families. Mark is devastated and furious, and he's blaming me for destroying his relationship. He's been telling anyone who will listen that I sabotaged his wedding because I was jealous that Lily wasn't invited. My parents are standing firmly behind my decision to expose Mark's deception, but they're also struggling with the fact that their son's wedding has been called off and their family is fractured. I'm proud of you for standing up for Lily, my mother told me. But I'm heartbroken that it came to this. I never imagined that Mark had these attitudes about disability. My father has been even more direct. Mark created this situation with his dishonesty and discrimination. You didn't destroy his wedding, he did. But not everyone in the family agrees. Mark's best man, our cousin Dave, who was part of the original conversation I overheard, has been vocal about his belief that I overreacted and that Mark's comments were taken out of context. Dave sent me a long email explaining that Mark was just trying to plan a perfect day and that I should have been more understanding about the stress he was under. According to Dave, exposing Mark's private comments to Jessica was vindictive and unnecessary. Mark loves Lily, Dave wrote. He was just worried about logistics and trying to avoid potential problems. You turned a private conversation about wedding planning into a public scandal that destroyed his relationship. Several other family members have echoed Dave's sentiments, suggesting that I should have kept Mark's comments private and worked things out between us rather than involving Jessica and the extended family. But my Aunt Sarah, whose son has Down syndrome, has been incredibly supportive and has helped me understand that this situation is about much more than just one wedding. What Mark said reveals a fundamental attitude about people with disabilities, she explained. He sees them as problems to be managed rather than people to be included. That's not something you can just work out privately, it's a belief system that affects how he treats disabled family members. My aunt also shared that she's been noticing Mark's attitudes toward her son for years, but had dismissed them as awkwardness rather than prejudice. Looking back, I can see that Mark has always been uncomfortable around my son, she said. He's polite but distant, and he tends to avoid interacting with him directly. I thought he just didn't know how to relate to kids with disabilities, but now I realize it was actually discomfort and prejudice. The most difficult part of this whole situation has been explaining to Lily what happened. She'd been disappointed about missing the wedding, but she'd accepted it as part of the child-free policy. Now I had to figure out how to tell her that her uncle had specifically excluded her because of her autism without devastating her self-esteem. I decided to be honest but age-appropriate. I told Lily that Uncle Mark had said some unkind things about her autism and that those comments made it clear he wasn't ready to include her in his wedding. I emphasized that his attitudes were wrong and hurtful, and that many people in our family disagreed with him. Lily's response broke my heart. "Did Uncle Mark say I was weird?" she asked. "Uncle Mark said some things that showed he doesn't understand autism very well," I told her. "But that's his problem, not yours. There's nothing wrong with being autistic, and there's nothing weird about you." "I don't want to go to his wedding anyway if he thinks I'm weird," Lily said with the matter-of-fact honesty that I love about her. "You're not weird, sweetheart. You're perfect exactly as you are, and anyone who can't see that is missing out." Update 3. 2 weeks have passed since Jessica called off the wedding, and I'm still processing everything that's happened. The family situation remains tense, but some important developments have occurred that I wanted to share. Mark finally reached out to me directly, not through other family members or angry phone calls, but with a request to meet in person. He said he wanted to apologize and try to repair our relationship. I was hesitant but agreed to meet him at a neutral location. The conversation was difficult and emotional. Mark did apologize for his comments about Lily, but his apology revealed that he still doesn't fully understand why what he said was so harmful. "I'm sorry I said those things about Lily," he began. "I was stressed about wedding planning and I said some things I didn't mean. I don't think Lily is weird or a problem. But you did say that her autism would freak out other kids and ruin your wedding atmosphere," I pointed out. "I was worried about how she might react to a big, formal event. I've seen her get overwhelmed at family gatherings before." "Mark, Lily has never had a meltdown at a family event. She's never disrupted anything or made anyone uncomfortable. What exactly have you seen that made you think she couldn't handle your wedding?" Mark struggled to answer this question. He eventually admitted that he couldn't think of any specific incidents where Lily had been disruptive, but that he'd been worried about the possibility. "I guess I was catastrophizing," he said. "I was so focused on having a perfect wedding that I started imagining worst-case scenarios." "But you weren't just worried about Lily, you specifically said that the child-free policy was perfect because it gave you a way to exclude her without having to say it directly." "That wasn't catastrophizing, that was deliberate deception." Mark looked uncomfortable. "I didn't want to hurt your feelings by singling out Lily specifically. So instead you lied to me for 6 months and let me believe that the policy applied to all children equally, while secretly planning to include Jessica's niece? That was wrong. I should have been honest with you from the beginning." But then Mark said something that showed he still didn't understand the real issue. "I think maybe we could have found a compromise if we talked about it directly," he said. "Maybe Lily could have come to the ceremony but not the reception, or maybe she could have had a quiet space to go to if she got overwhelmed." "Mark, do you hear yourself? You're still talking about Lily like she's a problem that needs special management. She's a 12-year-old girl who deserves the same consideration and inclusion as any other family member. I'm trying to be practical about her needs." "No, you're trying to minimize her presence because you're uncomfortable with her disability. There's a difference." The conversation continued for over an hour, and while Mark did express remorse for lying to me and acknowledge that his comments were hurtful, I left feeling like he still didn't truly understand why his attitudes were so problematic. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. Jessica reached out to me and asked if she could meet with Lily and me. She wanted to apologize directly to Lily for what Mark had said and to make sure Lily understood that not everyone in the family shared his views. I was touched by Jessica's gesture, and after discussing it with Lily, we agreed to meet. Jessica's conversation with Lily was beautiful and heartbreaking. She told Lily that she was sorry Mark had said unkind things about her autism, and that those comments were wrong and hurtful. "I want you to know that I think you're amazing," Jessica told Lily. "Your autism is part of what makes you special, and anyone who can't see that is missing out on knowing a wonderful person." Lily asked Jessica why she had decided not to marry Uncle Mark, and Jessica gave an honest but age-appropriate answer. "I realized that Uncle Mark and I had very different ideas about how to treat people," Jessica said. I believe that everyone deserves to be included and treated with kindness, especially family members. When I learned that Uncle Mark didn't share that belief, I knew we weren't right for each other. Jessica also told us that she'd been reflecting on her own attitudes and behaviors around disability inclusion. This situation made me realize that I need to be more aware of how people with disabilities are treated and excluded, even when it's not obvious, she said. She's since become involved with a local disability advocacy organization and has been learning about autism and other disabilities. She said that meeting with us was part of her effort to educate herself and become a better ally. I never want to be in a situation again where I unknowingly participate in discrimination, she told us. What happened with Mark taught me that I need to be more conscious and intentional about inclusion. Jessica's growth and advocacy work has been inspiring, and Lily has actually developed a friendship with her. They text occasionally, and Jessica has invited Lily to some disability awareness events that she's attending. It's been strange watching Mark's former fiancé become more supportive of Lily than Mark himself has ever been. Update 4, final. It's been 2 months since the original incident, and I wanted to provide a final update on how everything has resolved. Mark and I have had several more conversations since our initial meeting, and while our relationship will never be the same, we've reached a point where we can be civil with each other at family gatherings. Mark has made efforts to interact more directly with Lily, though their relationship remains somewhat strained. The most significant change is that Mark has begun attending workshops on disability awareness and inclusion. This wasn't something I requested or demanded. According to my parents, he decided on his own that he needed to educate himself about autism and other disabilities. I realized that my ignorance and discomfort were causing real harm to people I care about, Mark told me during our most recent conversation. I can't undo what I said or how I acted, but I can work on becoming a better person and a better uncle. Mark's efforts seem genuine, though I remain cautious about trusting him completely. Change takes time, and attitudes that have been ingrained for years don't shift overnight. The family dynamics have slowly stabilized, though there are still some relatives who believe I overreacted and that the whole situation could have been handled more privately. I've made peace with the fact that not everyone will understand why exposing Mark's discrimination was necessary. My Aunt Sarah and I have grown much closer through this experience. She's told me that watching me advocate for Lily has inspired her to be more vocal about inclusion for her own son. We've started attending disability advocacy events together and have become involved in local efforts to promote inclusion in community activities. Lily has thrived through all of this. Rather than being damaged by learning about Mark's attitudes, she's become more confident and self-advocating. She's started speaking up when she encounters situations where people make assumptions about her abilities, and she's developed a strong sense of her own worth that isn't dependent on other people's approval. I know I'm smart and kind, she told me recently. If some people can't see that because they only notice my autism, that's their problem, not mine. Her resilience and wisdom continue to amaze me. Jessica has become an unexpected ally and friend. She's continued her disability advocacy work and has become genuinely passionate about inclusion and accessibility. She and Lily have maintained their friendship, and Jessica often asks Lily for her perspective on autism-related issues. Meeting Lily and learning about her experiences opened my eyes to how much discrimination people with disabilities face, Jessica told me. I'm grateful that this situation, as painful as it was, led me to become more aware and involved in advocacy work. The most important lesson I've learned from this experience is the importance of standing up for your children, even when it's difficult and even when it creates conflict with people you love. Mark's deception and discrimination could have continued indefinitely if I hadn't overheard that conversation and confronted him about it. Some people have asked me if I regret exposing Mark's comments and causing his engagement to end. The answer is no. Jessica deserved to know who she was marrying, and Lily deserved to have someone advocate for her dignity and inclusion. Discrimination thrives in secrecy and silence. When people feel comfortable expressing prejudiced views privately while maintaining a facade of acceptance publicly, that discrimination continues and spreads. By bringing Mark's attitudes into the open, I forced everyone involved to confront the reality of how people with disabilities are often excluded and marginalized. The conversation I overheard wasn't just about one wedding or one policy, it was a window into attitudes and beliefs that affect how disabled people are treated in families, schools, workplaces, and communities every day. I'm proud that I stood up for my daughter, and I'm grateful that the experience led to education, growth, and positive change for several people involved. Lily deserves to be included, valued, and celebrated by her family, and I will always be willing to advocate for that inclusion, regardless of the personal cost. As I told Mark during one of our recent conversations, Lily doesn't need to change to be worthy of inclusion. The people around her need to change their attitudes and behaviors to become worthy of having her in their lives. She is exactly who she's supposed to be, and she deserves a world that celebrates her for it.